After 9 game weeks of information, a new FPL strategy has emerged that everyone will be talking about soon. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan, and whether you are on a wildcard right now, using a wildcard very soon, or you just want to use some transfers to restructure your team, this video is going to help you a lot. Honestly, guys, if you're not thinking about this kind of strategy yet, you will be within the next couple of game weeks, so let's get ahead of the crowd in FPL. So as the title of the video suggests, this is a video all about building a team with loads of those premium players in your team. And we're going to start off straight away by putting Salah, Palmer, Saka and Haaland on our field. This is our starting point. This is where we're looking to build around, because what we've seen so far this season is these big premium players have been dominating the FPL point scoring. If you look at the top 5 scoring players in FPL so far this season, Haaland, Salah, Palmer and Saka are all in there. And Moreno also makes the top 5, but that's just ahead of Saka, who's played less minutes, of course, due to that injury. But what we're seeing is there are so many big players that we want to have in our team. And every game week, I don't know if you guys are feeling the same way as me, but I maybe have 2 of these premium players in my team each week. Some of you guys may have 3. And every week, there is one of them you don't have, they score a bunch of points, and you lose out, and you start losing a bit of rank. Now, this game week, game week 9, it was a case of if you didn't have Salah, if you didn't have Saka, I didn't have either of those players in my team. They both scored well, and I dropped rank from those players. Yes, it was great to have the Palmer and Haaland points, but there were more points to be had that I didn't have access to because I only had 2 premium players in my team. Now, what's happened over the first 9 game weeks is we've gathered enough information to basically work out that you can actually have these 4 players in your FPL team, and the rest of your team doesn't even look that bad. There are so many emerging cheap options right now that we really can have all of the big players without really making too much sacrifice elsewhere. So it sounds like the rest of your team must be really bad if you're having these players, but as we're going to find out in this video, that's not really the case. Now, let's get a few things out the way first. Now, I've made this team with a value of 101 million. I hope most of you guys are at around 101 million team value, so you will be able to afford this. But I have to admit, this strategy is best if you have a higher team value. The higher your team value is, the easier it is to pull something like this off. Also, this is a very extreme variant of this strategy. It's definitely also viable to maybe have Salah, Palmer, Saka, and forget about Haaland. Just go for the 3 premium players and use the downgraded Haaland money to upgrade other areas of your field. So this is an extreme example. I know some people will be very down on Haaland at the moment, but let me tell you, if you go into the next game weeks without Haaland, there will be some game weeks where you wish you did have Haaland. And the idea of this strategy is to have them all. And I think it could work really well because certainly you will be gaining on the managers who are missing the players that you have and they don't, because the majority of FPL managers will be missing 1 or 2 of these 4 major players in the world of FPL. And every time, one of your rivals is missing one of these players, some weeks it will be Haaland they'll be missing, some weeks it will be Salah or Saka they'll be missing. Every time that happens, you will gain just a little bit more rank, slowly but surely up and up the table. But guys, one more thing to say before we get going. This video is mostly about the structure. It's gonna, you're gonna have different options that you may prefer. These are the players that I kind of prefer for this budget, and I think this works not just for a wild card in 12, as we mentioned earlier, but also you can just use your transfers to build towards this team. You don't even need to make this team right now, but I would say by game week 12, I would like to see most of us with maybe 3 premium players in our team by around game week 12. So this is not something you have to do instantly, but it's more something that we want to build towards, all of us really. And I think that's going to be the best strategy in FPL going forward. So I've rambled on enough. Let's start putting some players on the field, because it's very important that we actually identify, does the team still work even with these 4 players? I think yes. Hopefully you're going to agree with me by the end of the video. So Let's throw a goalkeeper in first, and we are going to go for Henderson. Now, Crystal Palace are a defence that have been improving week on week. Now, they started off the season pretty poorly, let's be honest. However, when we look at Crystal Palace now, they are now in kind of the mid-table areas of those defensive numbers. So they're at around 12.8 non-penalty expected goals against, which is around the same as, you know, Brighton, Bournemouth, Newcastle. So in that mid-table area. Now, the great thing about Henderson is that he is so cheap. He's now down to 4.4 million. And when you're building a team like this, every little point million really does count. Henderson is also great for save points. We know that about him. And even though the fixtures are mixed for Crystal Palace, you hope with a goalkeeper that they are a set and forget player. So going for a cheap goalkeeper, I think, is the best way to build a team with all of these premium players in. We know historically that the cheap goalkeepers can often score just as well or outscore some of the more expensive goalkeepers, and particularly a season like this where those clean sheets are difficult to predict. Going for someone like Henderson ahead of Raya, you save a lot of money, but you actually may score almost as many points. And we're hoping that the premium players make up for that deficit, I suppose. So we're going for Henderson in goal, nice and cheap, mid-table defence, goalkeeper capable of making saves, and also an improving defence, a defence that has got an upwards trajectory that will hopefully continue, and it'll get better and better, which would be very, very good. Into the defensive areas, we've got Rico Lewis first, 4.8 million. Now, that seems like a cheap defender, but in the context of this team, he's actually the most expensive defender on this team. And I think Lewis is kind of optional in a way because the fixtures are difficult. But Manchester City, currently their third best defence in the league when we look at those underlying numbers. They've only kept 2 clean sheets so far, but hopefully that can improve as we go forward. They're kind of tracking at under 1 expected goals conceded per fixture, which is really, really nice when we look at those non-penalty stats. And they don't really concede many shots. Man City are conceding the fewest shots of any team in the Premier League so far this season. So there's definitely positives to be taken there. But again, we're spending not very much money on a defender. So we have to manage our expectations a little bit. And if we're totally honest, who is outscoring Man City for clean sheets? Liverpool, Man United. That's about it of the, you know, the big differences. That's it. So, yeah, certainly Lewis, like him, a little bit of attacking threat there as well, which is very useful. Ait-Nouri is our next defender, and I don't think there'll be any arguments here. I think most of us will agree that this is definitely a defender to go for right now, if not for the defensive ability, but the attacking ability. And that's another major thing and trend we're seeing in FPL at the moment. Because those clean sheets are difficult to predict, what we are doing is we're going for more attacking defenders. So sometimes you will randomly get a clean sheet that you're not expecting because no one really expects any clean sheets in FPL at the moment. But what we can more accurately predict is those attacking returns. And Ait-Nouri is doing very well in that regard. He's up to 3 goals and 2 assists. And the fixtures are brilliant for Wolves for quite some time now. So Ait-Nouri can be a set and forget starting defender for 10, 15 game weeks now, which is brilliant. Exactly what you want. Just keep him in your team. Sometimes you'll get a clean sheet. Might be kind of rare, but you will get the occasional attacking return as well. And like I said, a lot of you guys are going to have Liverpool defenders, Arsenal defenders, maybe Spurs defenders, maybe Aston Villa defenders. Those players are not getting clean sheets either. If you've got a Konsa or a Saliba or someone like that, these guys are not getting attacking returns either. At least with Ait-Nouri, you've got that potential for attacking returns. And before we go any further, if you guys are enjoying this video, make sure you do drop a like on the video. It really does help out the channel so much. Do subscribe if you're new around here as well and want more FPL content on your screens pretty much every single day. Let's keep it moving. Which brings us to our final defender, and this is where maybe the debates start. And I have gone for Alex Moreno. Now, as people constantly point out, I always put a Nottingham Forest defender in my wildcard team videos, I guess, that I build. And that's because Forest just genuinely do have some of the best defensive numbers in the Premier League. They are the 4th best defence in the Premier League according to my numbers here. That puts them ahead of Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea, Fulham, Bournemouth, Brighton. You know, all these teams we consider to be fairly decent defences. They're only behind Liverpool, Aston Villa and Man City. Forest have already kept 3 clean sheets this season. Only Liverpool and Manchester United have more than them. So when you compare a Forest defender for 4.4 million compared to an Arsenal defender at 6 or more million, you've saved a lot of money. You're getting access to a roughly equivalent kind of defense ability, and maybe a little bit of attacking potential there as well with Moreno too, which is brilliant. Also, you know, we've got no Liverpool, we've got no Arsenal, and I think that is going to be something that people feel uncomfortable with in their defence. Now, Arsenal are now going to be missing Gabriel. We're not sure for how long. Liverpool are currently missing Alisson as well. So, you do have to wonder, is it really worth spending all the money on Liverpool and Arsenal defenders at the moment? Is it worth spending money on Man City defenders when you can have Lewis for cheaper? There are so many ways of accessing seemingly just as much points potential as the expensive players, but by going for these cheap players instead. So a cheap defense right now kind of works. We do also have some more cheap defenders on the bench, which I'm going to show you, and therefore we can start rotating these cheap defenders as well, trying to play the fixtures a little bit more, hopefully getting a few attacking returns for some of these guys, and everything should be wonderful. But we need to go to the midfield. We've already got a pretty stacked midfield here. We need to add one more player, and no surprise, it is going to be Morgan Rogers in here, who has been really impressive so far this season. A disappointing game week 9, but let's not let that one game week blind us, because outside of that fixture, maybe the odd other fixture earlier on in the season, Rodgers has been phenomenal in all competitions, a mainstay in this Aston Villa team, a very good Aston Villa team, a very good Aston Villa attack, who is taking shots, he's creating for his teammates as well, he looks nailed on, and we've got some okay fixtures occasionally. Again, Rodgers may be a rotation player for you guys, and he's not the only option. I do like Semenyo from game week 11, 12 onwards. I think he looks really good there for a similar price. We've got players like Smith Rowe, McNeil. Depends on your budget a little bit if you can afford to spend that little bit more, but Rodgers is definitely a viable option for you here. So yep, like this pick a lot, and I think he is a perfect enabler for your team. But where it gets really interesting is the forward position. And I think the forward position is probably, well, I guess downgrading defenders, which I think we all understand. But for the forward position is where we have so many more opportunities than perhaps we thought we would at this stage of the season, because there are so many cheap forwards doing so well. And by going for these cheap forwards, it allows us to upgrade other areas of our team and throw a bunch of money into our premium. So let's get the first guy out the way, Raul Jimenez, who I think would be an absolute essential lock on any wildcard team I'm building right now. Because not only, you know, I've been watching him the last few game weeks, he looks brilliant, in such good form at the moment. He's playing with such confidence. It really is incredible. And in fact, since he entered into the starting 11 for Fulham in game week 4, only one player is putting up better attacking numbers in the forward position, and that one player is Erling Haaland. So yes, we've got a Raul Jimenez who is, you know, generating more XG, you know, more expected assists, key passes, shots in the box, big chances. He's also now likely to be on penalties, which is brilliant. He's putting up better numbers than Watkins, Havertz, Nicholas Jackson, all of these other forwards that are far more expensive. He is doing better than at the moment, and he looked brilliant again in game week 9. I know he didn't get any attacking returns, but he came very close on multiple occasions, and I think there's some really positive signs here, particularly over the next few game weeks. Brentford at home, for example, amazing fixture. Wolves at home, really nice fixture as well. So we've got some nice fixtures for Fulham here. We've got a player in brilliant form, putting up all of these amazing numbers. I mean, let me read out some of these numbers for you because they are just so good. So let's go from game week 4 onwards. He has taken 22 shots, 19 in the box. This is in 6 game weeks, by the way, guys. 3.38 XG. That's about the same as Mo Salah, for reference there. He's got more expected assists than Salah as well, which is incredible. He's going to be on penalty. You know, Salah's had a few penalties. Raul Jimenez going to be on penalties here as well. That's going to be really useful. I'm not saying that, that Jimenez is going to score the same amount of points as Salah, but from what we've seen, he can come very, very close, which is why teams like this are so viable. When you've got 5.7 million players who are competing with those numbers, with Haaland and Salah and Palmer and Saka, that is exactly what we want. This is the perfect kind of enablers. And our final forward here is going to be Strand Larsen, and that's mostly budget dependent. I would say if you had a little bit more money, you know, I would maybe go for Wissa instead to cover the Brentford attack, because obviously we don't have Mbeumo in this team. And I think Mbeumo is probably the only player missing from this team where I would kind of think, I would really like that player. So, you know, if you were to go for a 3 premium draft, Mbeumo would probably be the first player I'd bring in, and then I'd look at players like maybe Trent Alexander-Arnold, maybe Nicholas Jackson as players to upgrade to. But Strand Larsen at 5.5 is really nice. We've spoken about the Wolves fixtures, really good for a long time now. He seems to be in very good form, Strand Larsen as well. The numbers aren't insane. They're not amazing so far this season. He's taken 12 shots all in the box, 5 big chances, so he is getting a big chance every other game. But I think what's important is that because Wolves have had such poor fixtures so far, I am hoping that the numbers for all Wolves players, and that includes like Nori, it includes Cunha, for example, as well. I'm hoping that these numbers will really, really improve, and we'll see Strand Larsen more at the level of, I don't know, maybe a Chris Wood in terms of those numbers. Obviously, Chris Wood is another player who has been overperforming his numbers, but if these Wolves guys can get to the same kind of levels as Wood, then I think there is going to be opportunities for some decent points here. But these players, they're strong players, they will tick along nicely. Cheap players like Strand Larsen, and I think it could work pretty well. Anyway, let's move on to the bench because there are a couple of rotation options for us here. Fabianski is going to be our bench goalkeeper. He recently re-entered the starting 11 for West Ham. So I wonder if he may get some more game time. I don't know if he is the permanent new first choice goalkeeper for West Ham, but certainly worth a punt. Minimum price you spend on a goalkeeper. Anyway, I've got Buonanotte on the bench at 5.1 million. If you wanted to save some budget, you could maybe downgrade to Dibbling at 4.6. He plays for Southampton, but Buonanotte has been pretty good as well. You could even start him against Ipswich, but he's been doing really, really well so far this season. Another player taking loads of shots, 17 shots so far this season in slightly reduced minutes because he has had some injury problems earlier on in the season. Also 11 key passes so far this season for Buonanotte. So these are decent numbers. You know, we're kind of looking at a similar to Rodgers really in those numbers. And actually, he's kind of been outscoring Rodgers so far this season, which is quite impressive. He scored 1 more goal. He's generating slightly more XG than Rodgers as well. So kind of a player you would put on a similar level as Rodgers, but maybe he has been ignored a little bit more because he does play for Leicester compared to Aston Villa. But yeah, certainly a really, really nice cheap option to go for. I would maybe, if you did have more budget, upgrade one of Rodgers or Buonanotte to a Smith Rowe, Semenyo, someone like that could work pretty well. I mean, to be fair, if you were to start Buonanotte and upgrade Rodgers to Semenyo, you could just bench Semenyo for the next 2 game weeks, because after that, like I say, the Semenyo fixtures do look really good from game week 11, 12, 13, no, 12, 13 onwards. Mostly 13 onwards. So yeah, again, that could work. Mykolenko, another defence that is improving on a positive trajectory, and I think with Branthwaite back in the team, that's going to really improve Everton defensively as well. The fixtures are really good for him, so definitely some potential. Again, you could start Mykolenko this game week with no problem. That would be absolutely fine to do. So like this for a pick, 4.3 million, absolute bargain. And Van den Berg to get a 4 million defender who is starting every game for a team that hasn't just been newly promoted, I think could be very nice as well. The other option is maybe a Coley at Leicester for 4 million if you wanted to go there. But again, we'd be looking for a nice cheap 4 million defender who is actually playable for a lot of these game weeks. So this is the team. It is not flashy and perfect. I know, like outside of our premiums, we've got no Watkins, we've got no Havertz, we've got no Trent Alexander-Arnold. It's not, you're not going to have everyone, but the hope is that we get all of the premium players in there that will consistently score you big points, and then outside of that, we go for cheap players that are capable of competing for points with those players who maybe are a little bit more expensive. And from what we've seen so far, all of these players are capable of competing with those players who are a little bit more expensive, which is exactly what we want. So we've used what we've gathered so far this season, and we've thrown them in a team and created something that actually looks pretty good. I would love to get your thoughts, guys, on this team, of what you think about it. But first of all, I do want to show you some of these rotations for your bench options coming onto the field to make sure that we are capitalizing on the fixtures with our cheaper players. So as I mentioned, we have got some bench players here that I think can rotate in and out. And that's another thing that I've kind of gathered from this season so far, is that having that bench cover is really, really useful. I mean, having Rodgers on my bench so far this season has really helped me out on multiple occasions. So definitely having a little bit of something on the bench. I know some people will be tempted to just go bare bones on the bench when going for these premium players, but I'm not sure I would like to play the game that way. I think it is still very useful to have that strong bench. But yeah, going week by week, let's zoom out a little bit. Let's go to game week 11. And I would perhaps think about playing a Vandenberg here instead of a Moreno against Newcastle. So that can work quite well there. If you want to play Buonanotte instead of Rodgers for that week, again, that could work pretty well as well. Moving on into game week 12. We can switch things up again, and maybe Strand Larsen away against Fulham drops to the bench, and we'd be looking at trying Mikalenko out against Brentford at home this time. Lewis and Aït-Nouri probably mainstays of the team. Game week 13, again, we're going to have a little rotation here. Lewis drops to the bench against Liverpool, because we probably don't want to play that Man City away against Liverpool. It's not ideal here. And by the way, I don't know if you've noticed, we're also changing the captain each week, mostly between Haaland and Salah, but I think certainly Palmer has some potential here as well. You could definitely captain Palmer in game week 13, for example, when Salah and Haaland play against each other. So that, again, works quite nicely. And Buonanotte, definitely an option to play in this game week as well, maybe instead of Rodgers and Strand Larsen. I think what we'll see is these three players, Buonanotte, Strand Larsen and Rodgers, will be like a three-man rotation for that cheap slot. Obviously, you play your premiums every week, no matter what the fixture, because these players will score even in the big games. Raul Jimenez plays every game week as well. So it's just about rotating. Rodgers, Strand Larsen and Buonanotte play 2 out of 3 each week. And then those 5 defenders can be rotated far more freely, depending on the fixtures, trying to target the easier ones each week. For example, in game week 13, you have Moreno and Vandenberg both playing at home against newly promoted teams, which is obviously absolutely wonderful and fantastic. And then that kind of rotation just continues on every single game week. So you can continue like that. So yeah, this is a really interesting team. It really is. I would love to hear your thoughts. There's some great minds out there in the FPL community. Some of you will be watching this video right now. I would love to hear your thoughts on this strategy. Do you think it will work? Are there any tweaks that you would make to it? And are you planning on doing it? I mean, I know for myself personally, I am going to be aiming to have 3 premium players by game week 12 at the absolute latest. I think that's going to be really, really handy. Could even go to 4. I might use my wildcard in order to do it. I might just use free transfers. I think there's plenty of options to kind of implement this strategy. But the most important thing is that this strategy is on our minds, and we are thinking about how we can do it and what changes we can make to our FPL teams to do it. So what do you guys think? Does this work? Do you prefer 3 premiums rather than 4? Do you like the cheap players that I've selected, or are there any other kind of cheap gems that you like the look of as well? Would love to get your thoughts on this video in particular. And of course, guys, I would love it if you would like the video as well. That would be super, super handy indeed. But let's wrap things up. I appreciate you watching today, guys. Leave a like, as I said, do subscribe, and I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.